I have a personal question for you today. How many of you consider yourselves to be, well, cheap? You know, cut the corners, come on, look for a deal, try to get things wherever and whenever for as little as you can. I'm talking about the kind of cheap when the car salesman gets nervous when you walk into the showroom. I'm not afraid to admit it, I'm cheap. I love a great deal. Your church's beautiful manse is filled with furniture and furnishings that we got at garage sales back in Morristown, New Jersey. When I was back in New Jersey, I was always worried that we were going to have a new members reception or something over at the manse, and one of our new members was going to say, "Wait a second, that lamp used to belong to me." I think you all have seen that $15 Rolex that I bought in Bangkok. The one that loses 2 or 3 minutes every hour or so. If you don't believe that I'm cheap, I'll tell you this. When I came home from visiting my mom this week, I came back on Spirit Airlines. $60 for a check-in bag, $70 to bring a carry-on. If you want to choose your own seat, it costs extra, even the middle seats. I'm thinking, like, where are the free seats? Out on the wing? I missed my connection due to their error, obviously. Spent an extra $250 in Las Vegas on Monday night trying to get a hotel and taxis and food. And this cheap streak goes doubly for clothes. I mean, why spend $130 on a Nordstrom tie when you can get the exact same tie for $19.99 at Nordstrom Rack? Okay, maybe not the exact same tie. The best deals are always in that section in the back of the store, the one that's marked as is. Some of them say slightly irregular. They're actually pretty blunt about it. That is the something has gone wrong section. It's not always immediately obvious what the defect is. They usually don't tell you, but you search long enough and, oh yeah, you're going to figure it out. A missing button, a broken zipper, a pocket that's sewn shut, one sleeve that's longer than the other. Normally what they do is they cut that tag in half. Have you seen that? Or they use a magic marker to black out the designer's name in a blatant attempt for the designer to try to disassociate themselves from those particular items. However it's done, the message is clear. These are damaged goods. If you were looking for perfection, you've come down the wrong aisle. This aisle offers no refunds, no exchanges, no returns. If you want the 1999 tie, you're going to have to take it as is. Well, I honestly think that each one of us should be born with the same tag. Because when it comes to dealing with people, there's only one aisle that we can shop in. The as-is aisle. Every single one of us is slightly irregular, aren't we? We all have our quirky defect or 2 or 3 or more. And just like my wardrobe, it isn't always obvious right at first what that irregularity is, but it's always there somewhere. A tendency to overreact, a sarcastic edge, a leaning towards gossip or a streak of jealousy or insecurity. Maybe a little ADD, some untruthfulness, a deep down anger or resentment or hurt that makes us overly guarded or passively aggressive or lash out in irrational ways, Will Smith. One person's a little clingy, another's rigidly independent. Another one is overly controlling. Another's a rebel at heart. Whatever your tag, we're all weird, aren't we? I mean, every single one of us. And it certainly makes for an interesting life, doesn't it? Living together in community. All of these defects rubbing up against each other, your irregularity exasperating mine, and vice versa. Most of us, at some point along the road, think that we've finally found that one unblemished garment from the other side of the store. And so we quickly marry them, just to find out that they're every bit as weird as we are. That they came from the exact same aisle we did, the as-is aisle. In the movie As Good as It Gets, the one where our friend Greg Kinnear was nominated for an Oscar, Carol, who's played by Helen Hunt, is totally torn over what she should do about her boyfriend Melvin, who's played by Jack Nicholson. He is one strange bird. He's so caring and wonderful towards her and her sick son, but he's also agoraphobic, obsessive-compulsive, and repugnantly offensive to everyone he meets. And so at one point in the movie, totally exasperated, Carol is talking to her mother, played by Shirley Knight, and she says, "Mom, I just want a normal boyfriend." And her mom says, "Oh, sweetie, everyone wants one of those. There's no such thing, dear." And what makes it all even more interesting is that we all know that we're weird, at least deep down we do. Most of us know our irregularities. They're as plain as the nose on our face to everyone else. And yet we go through our lives desperately trying to hide them, downplay them, pretend that they aren't there. And I think it's because our weirdness, our irregularities, tap into that original fear of ours, that we aren't going to have enough, we're not going to do enough, be enough, that we aren't enough. And so we go through life desperately trying to prove to ourselves and everyone around us that we have value, that we matter. This parable that we just read could not be a more perfect illustration or indictment on the holier-than-thou, self-righteous religious people. God, I thank you that I am not like the rest of these robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all I get. It would almost be comedic if it wasn't so sad. The truth is, I think we all understand that the more insecure we are about our own worth and value, the more we need to brag about ourselves, to try to build ourselves up. The more we need to criticize and tear down those around us so that I can feel a little better. I feel like I count in comparison. We all know it's true. We all know that the most insecure people we know are always those who are arrogant and bragging about themselves or criticizing others and tearing them down. You can't live in this world, especially not in this society, especially not in this city, without getting tempted to believe that your worth and your value comes from how you compare or how you stack up against others. We start falling for the lie that our value comes from the way that we look or what we have or the car we drive or the neighborhood we live in, which becomes a virtual black hole of insecurity. Sociologists say there's this phenomenon that as we compare, we're always comparing to those who are above us on whatever ladder it is that we're comparing ourselves to. So when it comes to work, we bust our butts to try to get that promotion and do a good job and stand out amongst our colleagues, and we finally get the promotion and they move us up to the next floor with the bigger office, where suddenly everyone else is on that next floor and everyone else has that or a bigger office, and it starts all over again. Or we scrap and we save to buy a new, a bigger, a fancier house, but it's in a fancier neighborhood where once again our house is the smallest house on the block. And especially in a city like LA where there is no limit to how high you can go. I just saw in the Brentwood Times a couple of days ago that Ben Affleck and Jennifer Gardner are selling their $50 million house here in Brentwood. Any of you want to try to compete with that? If yes, Norman Marcelon is our stewardship elder, and he'd like to talk to you after the service. The road of determining your value by trying to compare yourself to the people around you is a dead-end street. And so, the other day, I was at lunch down near the airport with my Covenant group, and I was in a shopping little center, and I saw a Nordstrom, so I went in to look at the ties, but I didn't even realize when I walked in that instead of it being a Nordstrom rack, it was an actual real Nordstrom's. Holy cow. Start looking at the price tags of some of those clothes, and you think, wait a second, is it already April Fool's Day? $10,000 for a dress? $2,000 for a pair of shoes? Is there gold woven into those things? What is that about? How is it possible to take a few yards of fabric and turn it into something worth $10,000? But of course, the answer is all in that designer label, isn't it? That's why all of the celebrities on that red carpet at the Oscars, they're so particular about who they wear, if you can remember anything else about the Oscars. The value comes according to the association. And then, that dress is made even more valuable depending on the person who wore it, right? Which is why anything that Princess Di wore was immediately worth so much more. Or maybe that yellow dress that Beyonce wore to open up the Academy Awards last weekend. That's why at the end of his concert, Bruno Mars can take that sweaty, nasty headband off of his head and toss it out into the audience, and people are going to be diving for it from all sides just to get a little bit of his DNA. The pastor at my old church, Dave Peterson, said he had seen Mick Jagger do that once, and so he thought he would try it at home. He had been out in his yard working really hard, and he had this sweaty brow with a sweatband on, and he came into his kitchen, and he took it off, and he flung it into the middle of their kitchen table. He said everyone scattered like he had thrown a rattlesnake. They came back with tongs, and they picked it up and put it in the trash. Because the value comes with the association. As we quickly approach Holy Week, next week, my friends, as we try to imagine the courage that it must have taken Jesus to even ride into that city, knowing full well all that was waiting for him there, the radical, sacrificial love that he was going to need to make it through Good Friday and everything else about that week, the question that hangs in the air is, what on earth did I ever do to deserve this? In this dog-eat-dog comparative competition city of relative value, who am I that Jesus would go through all of that just for me? And of course, the answer is that your value, your supreme value, does not come from what you do or who you know or how you perform or what you achieve or how you compare. Has there ever been a new parent after their baby is born, standing there at the window of that maternity ward, who looks in at all of those newborns in their bassinet and finally catches the eyes of their new infant, and then starts looking around and comparing it with the faces of all the other babies, wondering if maybe they'd rather have another? It doesn't happen. When you're driving the newborn home from the hospital, Are you ever embarrassed because your newborn hasn't done enough yet? They haven't achieved enough? They don't know how to write or walk or talk or ride a bicycle? Of course not. You love them because they are yours. You would do anything for them because they are your masterpiece, your creation, your beloved. When Paul calls us God's handiwork in Ephesians, he's echoing back to that verse in Genesis 1:27 that tells us that we were created by God and in the image of God, the Imago Dei. You know, sometimes during Holy Week, I think we can get a little bit too caught up in trying to figure out this superhuman love that it must have taken Jesus to so willingly die for us and go through all of that with us. Because I think we are not totally ready to fully believe that we belong to God. Like that newborn in the maternity ward. Like that baby that we strap into the car seat for that first ride home. For a stranger to suffer and give their life for you, that would be unimaginable, right? But for your own father, your own mother to do it, to give their life, to give everything that they have for you, that's just what they do, isn't it? All the time. You know that. The reason that you matter, the source of your value, isn't from how you compare to others. It's not wrapped up in what you do or what you achieve or how you perform. You matter and are of supreme value because you are God's designer creation. Jesus has chosen you and put you on to wear to the most important red carpet event in all of human history. Once we understand that, really, really understand that and are able to internalize it, we will never have an issue with our self-esteem or our sense of self-worth again. We will never feel the need to puff ourselves up or tear anyone else down or compare ourselves to anyone else. Once we truly understand this and internalize it, then we will be ready to receive the miracle of Holy Week. There's a sweet story about a little boy whose older brother had a rare blood disease. He needed a transfusion and he had a very rare blood type, but it was one that his younger brother shared with him. And so the parents approached this young boy with a very serious request. They sat him down and they asked him if he'd be willing to share some of his blood so that he could save his older brother's life. And as they were talking, the little boy, his eyes got bigger and bigger, and he got very quiet, and he didn't say one word for the longest time. And finally, with tears in his eyes, he just sort of trembled and shook his head yes. And so immediately they whisked him off and they prepped him for the operation, and they brought him into the same operating room where his brother was and put him on a gurney right next to his brother, and they put in the IVs and the drips and the wires and the monitors. And the little boy looked over and he smiled at his brother, and then he looked back up to the doctor. And with a quivering but brave voice, he said, "Will it hurt? Will you tell me before I die?" This little boy thought he was having to give his life for his brothers. Because that's what people do when they really, really belong to each other. You have been designed and created and chosen by the God of this universe. Allow yourself to understand that, and suddenly Holy Week and all that goes on in it will make total sense. Understand that, and you will set yourself up to have a transformational Easter morning. Amen. I can't imagine a better place for you to begin to prepare for everything we are about to go through next